All right, there we go. Now we're live, John.
What's up?
Well, I've got these buttons I had to push to go live here.
I'm really concerned about these buttons.
The buttons are cool. That's what makes it so good.
Yeah,
and they make them colored. So you know what the bad about the colored buttons?
You're colorblind.
And everybody wants to push them. You know, it's like push the blue button. Well, there's 5 blue buttons to me over here.
Right.
So I even made a cheat sheet. Hey, we just want to tell everybody thanks for tuning in with us today. We got a special guest with us, the John Farber. We're going to talk about...
The John Farber. Did you hear that?
Did I say the?
You did.
It's like the Walmart. You know, I'm going down... Where are you going? To the Walmart. Not going to Walmart, but to the Walmart. It puts a little emphasis on it. Okay. But, you know, we got John Farber here with us this morning, and Bob is in Lake Charles. So he's doing what Bob does, serving. He's helping the church down there and doing some disaster cleanup. And so, you know, I miss him, but he's always fun to have on here. So we'll just plan on picking on you today instead of us picking on each other. You know, this thing can go sideways quick, right?
Well, this is why I record podcasts that I'm on.
So, why? There's so much pressure that way.
No, there's less pressure.
No, there's not, because then you have to look at it. See, this way you just throw it out there. Then if you just fall off the stool or something, it's like, well, I fell off the stool. Yeah, well. And the thing falls over, or the camera or something like that, then you're just like, well, it is what it is. Yeah. Ain't nothing I can do about it. But I got these buttons. And so we got a cheat sheet that tells me which one of these, like this one. Like, we like to push that one. It's funny. Bob even recorded intro. Listen.
This is the Unscripted podcast.
So technically, I was supposed to have pushed that when we started, but we're not very good at this. We aspire to be amateurs.
You know, the great thing is, Chris has just given me this tour of this, you know, the setup that they've got and he's demonstrated the buttons. And
the buttons.
The buttons are my biggest concern right now because they're, you know.
I could go rogue instantly.
I expect you to go rogue. Not if, it's when.
Well, you know, the cool thing about this is like we get we got such great shepherds here that really just are invested in the idea of getting the gospel to the world. And this is just another avenue that we can do it with.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want to talk about this morning is, you know, how we get the gospel into the world. And so, you know, we got this room here. We're stuck and we're isolated in here, not quarantined. So anybody that's going to be here tonight with us, there's no Rona, but we're in here, but the world isn't in here.
Right. The
world's out there. Right. And so, sometimes we've turned the church into, I don't know, a catering club, so to speak. And, you know, the core doctrine of Christianity is save souls, right? And that's what I want to talk about this morning is so you tell us, because we said we're going to take 30 minutes. And Bob and I told you beforehand, we usually plan on 20, and we usually are really good at keeping it to an hour and 15.
Right.
And so tell us about what you do, John. Give us the dime show tour of what you do.
So my specific job is I lead medical mission campaigns to Central and South America. And I help coordinate evangelistic strategies in 3 different countries, in Peru, Honduras, and Nicaragua. So I work with the guys on the ground, the preachers that are there, the ones that, you know, are living there every day. I work with those guys. I strategize with them. Where does the gospel need to go next? What cities are there that don't have the church presence that needs to be there? So that's kind of my job is I'm out there going and talking with these guys, and then we coordinate those campaigns in those areas. And so I'm actually... The thing that I love about my job is I get to be a church planter. So I get to actually take the church to a place where it's never been, as far as we know, in the history of mankind, and that hopefully the church will be for the rest of time.
Hey, ain't that such an awesome thing? I mean,
I'm telling you, there's nothing like it.
I tell you, one of the things that I love is like when we figure out these, you know, God has tasked us with this thing, right? The reason why the Great Commission is so great is because the commissioner was great.
Right.
And so when the Lord gives us this command to go into the world, you know, we see kind of a neck down version of the plan in Acts 1 and verse 8, you know, go into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the world. And so what kind of an awesome, you know, like here in Hattiesburg with the KW church, like we really focus on the Jerusalem. And for years, we focused on the KW church is focused on Tanzania. As a matter of fact, one of our elders just got back from the work there. And so, God has tasked us with this great responsibility of carrying the God of conversions. And so it's up to us then to figure out how we're going to do it. There's no, you got this little teeny tiny, just think about how big the section of your book is. This is all you get wide for how to get to heaven. Right? I've got a machinist handbook in my toolbox that's this thick. That only tells you how to make stuff.
Right.
This is just metallurgical data and speeds and feeds and drill sizes and, cosines, cosecants, cotangents, all these things. But that's how to make something. This is what God gives us to get to heaven. And not just me, but everybody.
Right. Like you mentioned the term Great Commission before. I don't particularly like that term.
Why not?
So I'm going rogue first. I'm beating you to the punch.
Story time.
So, Great Commission is not actually words in the text of the Bible, right?
That's right.
And when you put something like the Great Commission on this little section of verses, right? It makes it seem like, well, if it's a great commission, then we've got to have some kind of plan. We've got to have, if it's a great commission, then it sounds important. It sounds like we've got to have this amazing plan, this amazing thing to happen in order for it to get accomplished.
Why do you say that? Because it lends credence to the fact that we've got to have some kind of, super spectacular model or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
The idea is go into all the world, right?
Right.
That's not really that hard.
Okay.
You need a plan. I'm not saying you don't need a plan, but I'm saying it can get to where the plan becomes more important than the execution.
Qualify that statement.
When you spend more time planning than you are doing, that's a problem.
All right, so why shouldn't you plan then?
I'm not saying you shouldn't plan. Not saying you shouldn't plan. I'm saying if you're spending more time on the plan, like for example, I have for a long time had this ambition to.
Hey, if anybody's out there and if there's any audio problems or something, how about just dropping us a comment? Somebody's watching. Let us know what it sounds like if you don't mind.
So I've had this ambition to have my own YouTube channel.
Okay, well, everybody gets one with a Gmail address, John. So that's not a very ambitious plan.
But to actually use it. And
that was a green button.
I tried to go rogue before he did, so now he's paying me back. So, but I have been watching YouTube videos for years about how to film and how to do the type and style of thing that I'm wanting to do, because I want to take the mission work and I want to give it a bigger platform. That's my ambition, right?
All right.
So I've been thinking about it, planning for it. I've got some equipment for it, and I use that equipment for other recording stuff and that. But I don't have a YouTube channel yet. It's not doing anything. I've got one, but it's not doing anything yet. So there are so many Christians that's how they feel.
What do you mean by that? They feel. What are you saying? What do you mean?
Well, the Great Commission, that's definitely important. I'm all about that. Yeah. And I want to be a part of that. I just need to, I need to learn more. Mm-hmm. I need to, before I get into that, I'm going to have to, I got to learn Spanish before I can go to Honduras.
Right. Well, you've heard me, John, make a fool of myself many times. So you think about this, okay? And it's just these titles that we get in our little, the little right. chunks that we stuck in later, right? And we do those well-meaning, right? It's not like there was any malicious intent behind, Matthew 28:18. They got the Great Commission written in, and I don't know if it's in my preacher Bible or not, but they kind of. I don't know. They form these innate checklists, unfortunately, and so what happens is, especially in the church, sometimes, and I don't mean to downplay the importance of knowing the scriptures. I don't. Paul told Timothy, take heed to yourself, to your doctrine. All these things. He's very, in doing so, you save yourself and save those who hear you. He's very explicit with that, but You figure in Acts 1 and verse 8, when there's this, detailed plan of the commission, so to speak, right? And that was even highly undetailed in and of itself. Mm-hmm. In Acts 8 and verse 1, when you see the fulfillment of this, when the after the stoning of Stephen, the disciples are going everywhere evangelizing, preaching and teaching the word. Well, it's not like these would have been they wouldn't have been a book, chapter, and verse on every little thing. And right. You know what they could go and tell them about was like, man, you will not believe what's happened in my life. There was a God that made everything around us. He sent his son, and I'm 35, or I'm 40, or I'm 45, and I'm aging out in first century Rome, right? I mean, I'm at the end of my life expectancy, and now I'm looking at eternity, and I've got this blessed hope. That's what Paul said in Romans 8. This we hope. It's not that we hope I'm going to be saved, but we have this blessed hope. This we sing blessed assurance, and so that's what they could go everywhere teaching. Every Christian that has become a Christian, they know what they did to do that.
Right.
They can surely tell somebody. They may not be able to give a theological discourse on Melchizedek, but you don't need that to go to heaven.
Absolutely. And the thing that is so great about the work that I get to be involved in is we see that played out, right? We bring people from all walks of life, from all over the United States, and they come together. And you've heard me on one of the first nights or first days that we're in on a campaign, we get a big group meeting together, and we talk about, like, hey, most of you guys don't know each other. Like, I'll have people from Oklahoma, California, from New Jersey, from Florida, from Virginia, from Mississippi.
Why didn't you start with Virginia?
It was, save the best for last.
Okay.
So we have people from all over the United States, and they don't know each other from Adam, most of them, unless they've been on a trip together before. And there's always new people. And I say one of the things that you're going to experience this week is that you're going to see people that you don't know, and in within an hour, you guys are going to be a team.
Oh, so awesome!
Isn't that cool?
It's like just in Psalm 110. I think it's verse 3. It says that on the day of your power, your troops will be ready. Some of versions are going to say this volunteer army, right? And on the day of your power, this is the section of the Psalms that Peter quotes on Pentecost. Right. On the day of your power, your troops will be ready like the dew of the morning. They'll have the strength of their youth. Like the dew falls on the ground every day. It's always there. It's dependable. It's consistent. And that's such a blessing in the church, is that this is an all volunteer army. There's nobody in the world. I mean, organizations, they write guidelines and principles, and they put it on poster boards or practices. But the Lord's church,
volumes.
Yeah. I mean, right, exactly. Then they revise it.
Right.
Like revision 48Z, right? But the Lord's church has got that built in, because you know why? He's got our hearts.
Right.
So when he's got our hearts, he's got I'm all in then.
All of it.
And so you get to meet some of the most awesome. I mean, I have forged some of the most awesome friendships with people. And that's the reason why I'm here. I met Bob in Honduras years ago. He came with us. I don't remember where. They run together to me. He'll be able to tell you. But it was Dan Lee, I believe. But I met him there, and I forged you get to love people instantly.
Oh yeah.
I mean, absolutely. It's just such a blessing.
But I say there's, and this, I wrap up the week with this almost every time. There's nothing that if the Lord's people choose to do the Lord's work, there is nothing that can't be accomplished.
By the end of the first century, you're I like to read these historical writings. By the end of the first century, they're writing letters, right? Roman governors are writing letters to the emperors that have sent them Trajan out, and they're having these powwows, and they're like, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but they're everywhere. They're in the cities, they're in the countryside, they're in every class of, he's painting this picture like, listen, these guys are everywhere. And that was in 1 century. 1 century. I mean, by the time you get to Nicaea, Constantine is trying to circle the wagons on Christianity. Like, if I can get these guys run them up under my gambit, then maybe I can gain control of the Roman Empire, because there's so many of us by that point.
Yeah. And
so we can do whatever we want to do. We limit. We are the limit.
Oh, yeah. So I'll tell you a story about, at the beginning of all this quarantine
Do I get to push a button?
Yes.
It's the green button is the. What's that? This one do? Nah, that's not it either. Okay, go ahead.
Button fail. So
Burp.
at the beginning of all this pandemic stuff, right before, I mean, this was like right before the NBA decided to shut down, right before all this, we were all kind of still, we're going to be able to do the campaigns in the summer and stuff. We actually had a
We
team,
as in lamb.
Lamb, yeah. We had a team in El Salvador at the time. And then it was that week when things started really shutting down.
I remember this. I remember this happening.
And in that week, the NBA decided to shut down all of the sports leagues, the MLB spring training let out. All this stuff started happening because of the pandemic, and we had a team in El Salvador. This is the week that everything like shut down,
Right.
and they found out probably on Wednesday that within the next day or two they were going to shut the borders to El Salvador. And they had to do everything that they could. I mean, basically, they had to say, we got to shut things down. We've got to be able to get out of here. By the time they got all of their ducks in a row to make it happen, they ultimately they couldn't fly directly from El Salvador back to the States. They had to fly to...
It was Nicaragua, wasn't it?
It was either Nicaragua or...
Guatemala City. One in Guatemala City.
Guatemala, yeah.
Yeah, it was Guatemala City.
And then from Guatemala back to the States.
Yeah.
There was one gentleman on that campaign who footed the bill for all that.
Ain't that something, man?
And you want to talk about a sacrifice. I don't know if his local congregation or the different campaigners were going to, help pay him back or whatever. That wasn't really even the consideration. The consideration was, these are my brothers and sisters in Christ. We got to do what we've got to do in order to make it back to our families. And that's what it took. And where else are you going to see that other than the
church?
church?
What's awesome about that is all of our people, everybody's got a story like that. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Like everybody can tell some kind of story like that, whatever way in the church, because there's just so many awesome people, and that's why the Lord, when he gave us this I don't want to say obligation. It sounds bad. When He gave us this awesome responsibility and task, He did it because He had confidence in us.
Right.
It's not that He He used a donkey with Balaam, mm-hmm. right? He used a bush with Moses. There's all kinds of cool stories that we can Vacation Bible School it up, right?
Right.
But God chose us. And so he realized the reason why is He made us and He's got confidence. And it's we are the ones that limit everything.
So this kind of goes back to the reason why I don't like the title Great Commission, right? Because
we are not going to make this 30-minute deal. I'm just going to let you know.
So the idea of Great Commission, it makes it sound like, well, if I'm going to do the Great Commission, I got to be somebody like a Peter. I got to be somebody like a Paul, or I got to be somebody like Ananias and Sapphira, or whatever.
I don't want to be those guys. Aquila and Priscilla.
Aquila and Priscilla, that's the one. Sorry. And that was the one to the right of that.
Yeah, that's.
So,
do you want to push the buttons?
No, I don't want to take your job. You might pout.
No.
With something like the Great Commission, you feel like, oh, well, I've got to be this great person in order to do this great thing. And it's not. It's like, do you realize Paul...
So you're saying the title adds too much weight to it then, right?
It can.
Because what we do is we have this lateral connection to but even those guys, Paul, Peter, Barnabas, Ananias and Sapphira, those guys... all those guys, okay, so you take the Apostle Paul. His story only becomes great after he loses his head. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like he's a vagabond. He's a criminal, right? I mean, so it's not like Paul is like this. He's a rock star to us.
Right.
He wasn't a rock star in 56 AD.
Well, and the thing that I just don't think a lot of people like internalize. there's the same blood running through Paul's veins as running through my veins.
That's what he said in Acts 17. God, who made all nations of men on the face of the earth of one blood.
Yeah.
Una sangre.
There's nothing special or different about Peter. There's nothing amazing or...
Look at the people Jesus chose.
Yeah. I mean, there was nothing remarkable about any of them that would separate them from a Chris Donovan or a John Farber or anybody. I really love the verse in Titus chapter 3, verse 14. It says, and let our people learn. Let me pull it up real quick because I don't want to misquote it.
Ananias and Sapphira.
Right. Titus 3:14.
Yes, found it.
It said, let our people learn to devote themselves to good works so as to help in cases of urgent need and to not be unfruitful. And so the two first things that I've done a whole sermon on this, a whole 40-minute sermon on this. And the first thing that pops out is there's an our people. Like, that's the thing in our culture right now that just is going to make people cringe, is like there's an us and there's a them.
Oh, man.
Really? That's not politically correct.
Right.
So, but there is an us and a them. But it says, let our people learn. So one of the things right off the bat is none of this comes natural. There was Chris Donovans aren't born, right? The Apostle Paul's aren't born.
Can we not put me in that category?
Okay. The Apostle Peter's, they're not just born. They learn.
Amen.
They see the job that needs to get done and they learn how to do it.
I need a mic drop button. That was a good quote. That was just awesome. You're right. And that's...
And anybody can do it.
That's the crux of Christianity, John.
Right.
Is that it is the reason why we can become Christians is because we can make a decision. That's the only reason we can become Christians, because we can make a decision. We can weigh the facts. You can boil it down to however you want to. And I don't mean to take the emotion out of it or anything like that, but we have looked at it legitimately. That's what Hebrews 8 through 13 is about. Behold, the day shall come when I make a new covenant, house of Judah, house of Israel. And he goes through and all these things. He's pointing out this idea that the people in his new covenant are going to know me because I've written my law on their minds and on their hearts. Well, you don't get something on your mind and on your heart by osmosis or download like the Matrix, right? It's something you have to learn. Jesus said, are you heavy laden? You got a burden to bear. Learn of me, right? Christianity, that's the blessing of it, is it's a process, right? And so any one of us can become whatever we want to be. We limit God.
And that's why I go back to what I said earlier was when God's people choose to do God's will, there's nothing that can stop us.
That's what God said at Babel. You remember?
Yeah.
He's like, they confused their languages because he said, look, there's nothing we can't hold them back from now.
Yeah. And I mean, that sentiment is still repeated in Romans where he says, hey, what can separate us from the love of God?
Yeah. Romans 8. Yeah.
There's a whole list of scary
nakedness.
things.
Yeah. I mean, right. Famine. And speaking of nakedness, why didn't you wear any pants? This is ridiculous. No, I'm just playing. And flip-flops. I don't know if that's cool in Florida, but here it's weird. But
that's all we're wearing for it.
But that's the blessing of it is now, to me as a Christian, it takes a lot of that burden. Satan is the one that shackles me with these burdens, not the Lord. Any commandment, that's why Peter would use this term that his commandments aren't grievous. It's not like when you tell your boys or your boy, clean your room. That's a grievous burden, because my boy's just going to be 2 hours of picking up Legos and bullets. And so that's the problem, is that it's a grievous commandment. But when the Lord gives this commandment, like, guys, it's up to you. You can do this. You really can do this. It's not like it really unshackles you, because I know that he's telling me because he's got confidence in me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's the devil's whole plan, to say, hey, all of these things that you shouldn't be doing, I want to distract you by all those things, because I want you to be worried about all the things that you shouldn't be doing, so that you're so consumed by the things you shouldn't be doing that you have no idea what it is that you even should be doing.
That's right. And it's just what it does is it's just a divide and a focus. I do have another button, by the way, that I didn't hit. The record button. So I'm going to have to rip the audio again out of this thing. I have this button. It's the biggest one on here, too, and I can't remember to hit this button.
For somebody who likes all these buttons so much.
Well, these are comical. This just becomes more of... This is like a blister.
It's a job.
This is what it is. It shows up after the work is done. And so... But... So tell us specifically what is involved in. So like let's use an example. A few years ago, when we went to Gracias, we went to Gracias because strategically it was we had a brother there, Oscar Razzo, started a little church there. It was, I don't know, 10
Less
people.
than 10.
Yes, 8 people, something like that. And I don't remember what it was now. But the president was from there. And so Juan Orlando, the president of Honduras, he was doing all these infrastructural projects. I mean, that's the socialist Greece, really, is what you were seeing turning there. All these, a lot of people are moving to the town. So we just looked at that and said, hey, this is a good place that we think is conducive for growing the church. And then when they peter out, I mean, they're going to, it's just a way of it. You pray that those guys that you have taught and become Christians, that they'll take that same message, right? Because here's something that I like that our Latino brothers do that we kind of fall down on sometimes, is that I have been a part of converting somebody in a week, and then that Sunday morning they're going to get up and extend the invitation, and it's all they have to do is just say, what did you do to become a Christian? That's all you got. That's what you got to tell them. I mean, everybody ought to tell them that I understood that Jesus was the Lord and he died for me. Yep. And there's a way that I can be reborn. And that's going to be through understanding that he's going to be Lord now. And I've got to be baptized to wash away my sins. And now upon that, the Lord cleanses me and adds me to his church. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't take great discourse and theology to do that. And so like Gracias, that was a strategic location, and that just made sense to do that.
Right.
And so that's what the Lord wants us to do, is to do the things that make sense. It doesn't have to be, some kind of, let's build a 48-story hospital, and then let's go through this great, huge, process and all these things we have to do in order to, to really knock it out of the park. No. When Peter comes to Pentecost with the keys to the kingdom, there's only about 100 of them. You ever think you're alone in the world? Well, buddy, they were alone in the world.
Yep.
And so we limit God on what we want to do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say probably most people would think that they limit themselves. But the problem is that if we are the vessel of God, then what we're saying is God must not have created that vessel good enough. Mm. He must not have created it strong enough.
He messed up.
He must not have made it pretty enough. He must not have made it smart enough. He must not have made it patient enough. He must not have made it rich enough. Mm. He must not have made it whatever you want to fill in the blank there. But the problem is, it's not that God has made us enough. It's that God made us. Mm-hmm. And that is always enough.
Amen. I mean, you think about how many times, one of the things that, we're studying the commandments in our home, mm-hmm. right, this week, and as part of our monthly characteristic. And, don't make any graven image. And that's because God is looking at that saying, you are not going to be able to come up with something that's going to be, you're going to envision it in your own eyes of how pretty or how, masterful I am. You're missing it.
Right.
You're missing it. You're the clay.
Right.
I'm the potter. Isaiah, even through kind of hyperbole, uses this analogy of, you guys saw down this tree, then you carve it into your gods. You use the shavings to heat your food with. You cook your food. You have to carry it in on your shoulders, put nails in his feet to hold it up, and then you say, you bow down to worship it. And he's like, do you see how foolish that is?
Yeah.
And so God, everything, when Israel crossed over Jordan, he said, get 12 rocks out the river. Don't touch them. Don't think that you can fancy them up with your no stone tools, because I put those rocks in the river. Yeah. I made them the way I wanted them to make them. So whatever you think you're going to make them look like, you're going to mess it up. God made us perfect, and he made us with this great ability. I mean, he chose 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 21, the foolishness of preaching. Right. That's the way God wanted to save souls, was through the harbinging of the message. And so it's up to us. And so then, John, how did you get hooked up with Lamb? I mean, tell me the Tell
I grew up with it.
Yeah.
So
I'll set that story up.
It.
Yeah.
So my dad is Jack Farber, who has been with Latin American Missions.
Jack Farber.
The Jack Farber.
Panama Jack.
Panama Jack. We moved to Panama when I was 6 years old. For the first time.
In 1968.
Yeah. 81. Thank you. So in 1981, we moved to Panama, and we lived there for 3 years. My dad was working with the school of preaching there.
What's with the school?
The School of Preaching is one of, if not the longest running school that's like, we've never closed our doors, right? So there have been some that are
longest
older.
running school in the Brotherhood, you mean?
Brotherhood.
Okay.
There are others that have been around since earlier, but they closed maybe for a while and then reopened or whatever. But as far as we can tell, it's one of the, I don't want to, it's not a contest or anything.
Right.
But we've been around for so long. We've been training preachers all over Central, South America, any Spanish speaking country.
So the school's in Panama.
Schools in Panama.
And that's where y'all were at. And Jack was helping with the school, right? Y'all lived there in Panama for your elementary school years, right?
Yeah. I was kindergarten, first and second grade there.
Isn't it elementary school?
Yeah.
I think it was about the
Primary.
fifth grade. Yeah, whatever. Well, John, I'm from the mountains. We had two schools, K through 8, and then K through 7, and then 8 through 12. Okay, so I'm still learning the dichotomy of school systems here. Go ahead.
Right. So we, when we lived there, I went on campaigns with my dad back then. I remember my uncle was there, and I translated for him. He was going around with his video.
Is that your mama's brother or your daddy's
brother?
Okay.
And we had,
he was videoing?
He was videoing with a little camera. He had one of those that you put over the shoulder things.
Right, the brick.
Big VHS tape in it and all that. So,
Funk.
Yeah. So he was videoing some stuff at that point. I was translating for him. In that short 3 years, I was fluent in Spanish because I was such a small kid. I absorbed it like a sponge.
Right.
And so I really grew up with it. And then we moved back. We moved to Valdosta because the guy who had been kind of running things for a long time, his name is Bob Bryson. He was getting older, and they really wanted my dad.
So Valdosta is where
Is they're the overseeing congregation of Latin American Missions, is the Forest Park Church of Christ in Valdosta. And so when we moved to Valdosta to kind of assume some of those responsibilities, I've been associated with it ever since. And I started going back into some of these countries when I was in high school, and just kept going with it. And back in 2010, they had lost a couple of the missionaries, and my Spanish was still decent, and they were looking for some guys, and they didn't necessarily ask me. I was actually helping a buddy of mine, trying to raise funds and stuff like that to do it. And I was talking about it so much. At the time, I was selling insurance. I'd been a youth minister. I was selling insurance. And then my wife was like, seems like you're really excited about this for Jared, my buddy Jared. And I said, well, yeah. She goes, are you more excited?
Where were y'all at then?
We were in Jacksonville.
Okay.
And so she was like, are you more excited for him or more excited for you? And I was like, I don't know. So I tell my wife all the time, this was her idea. that I get.
So in case she fusses, is that why?
No, she's never fussed. She's actually
okay. I'm not trying to start any fights here. I just want to know because I need help sometimes.
Instigator, bully. So and I've been doing it ever since, and really, and it's kind of one of those things where I've been around it so much all my life. I thought, well, yeah, I can do that. That's easy, no problem. I can.
It's fluid.
Yeah, but I didn't know how much I didn't know.
Yeah, ain't that something?
So
ain't that awesome?
Yeah, you peek behind the curtain in any organization, and you
it's like realize, a duck, right?
Exactly. So, but I mean, anybody that's out there that has any interest in doing campaigns into Central and South America, I mean, hit me up. I mean, on Facebook or contact Chris. He'll get you in touch with me.
Yeah, we're super excited. I've been hooked on it for years, and that's why I love being such a a part of it. And it's just so awesome to be able to to kind of when I first started going, it was really just Bible studies, and I loved that. And now it's kind of I've kind of taken on a little bit of different capacity of role, but I still love the work so much about it, and it's so awesome to see how all God's people can come together. And and what happens is people will say things when you're on a campaign like we should just move down here. And like, there is so much activity on a campaign. Like, you work like a rented mule for a week. Okay. People don't realize that, like, after doing this about 3 or 4 months, you would just flat kill yourself. I mean, it is hard work, but I'm going to tell you,
unforgiving circumstances.
It is the best kind of sleeping.
Oh yeah.
Like I mean, and you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, I've got so many funny, cool stories. I mean, I was telling somebody the other day, and last year when we were in, where were we at? San Diego, right? Is that where it was?
Yeah.
And like, you had rented this van. And so I'm tooling around driving this van, cause I've driven down there so many times, I just take off and go, right? And so I'm driving this van, and I'm like,
I rent the van for Chris. It's not for me. It's like, here you go, Chris. He gets off the plane. Here you go.
Well, there's an issue I needed to deal with, that time, and so I had to take off. But I'm driving this van for like 4 days, and I'm down to 3/4 tank. And I'm like, I don't know what this thing is, and I'm buying one of these, and I'm sending it home. I mean, like, I've driven the brakes off this thing, and I hadn't used any fuel.
I forgot about this.
Well, I come down this little road, and I'm like, what's going on here? Well, I run out of gas. And so I think it was Armando. Right. And I call Armando. I'm like, Armando, I'm broke down. I don't know what's going on. I can't figure this thing out. And I'm going through this thing. And me, instantly, it's like, get the tools. Let's start taking this thing apart. I'm pulling stuff out in the road. And luckily, I just come to drift in this little spot under the shade tree. And the chickens are running around. And Armando's like, oh, I forgot to tell you. The gas gauge is empty at 3/4. And I'm like, man, that was a fine time. So here I am thinking, like, you know what? And they're waiting on us for a gospel meeting. Remember, we had
you had the preacher.
Yeah, that's right. And so we're waiting on us for the gospel meeting. They're like, well, this is what we're going to do now. We're going to wait right here and watch the chickens scratch up bugs until they can bring me a milk jug full of diesel to try to get it started up again. And, it's just, that's just it in a nutshell. You just don't know what's going to happen. But you just say, you know what, Lord? I don't know what I got to do, but I just want to do the best I can. And so, does that mean you're going to run out of diesel sometimes? Sure. But what it means is that I gave all.
Is there, I mean, for me, when he talks about, Jesus talks about going to Jerusalem, Judea, or Jerusalem, Samaria, Judea, and the uttermost parts of the world, and part of me wants to see that as a progression of maturity.
In people? In
people, yeah. And what is the best thing I can do as a Christian? And I can't think of anything better than missions. In sharing that message with somebody. Now, that mission for you is not geographical.
Sure.
It's not based on your geography. A mission trip is based on the fact that you have a mission.
Amen.
And your mission may be next door. Your mission may be in your work, or your mission may be at your school, or your mission may be in your church. There may be some people that aren't living the way they ought to live. Whatever your mission is, you need to be about your mission. So there's nothing better that you can do than do missions.
Amen. Well, John, listen, we have set on 41 minutes and 50 seconds. And so I appreciate you being on here with us tonight. And today.
It's not even lunchtime yet.
Well, it's kind of lunchtime. And it is for you.
It definitely is for me.
Right, you're still on East Coast time, but we're glad that we had everybody, that we had you with us this morning. We appreciate you talking to us about all these things, and John, we just want to tell you how much we appreciate you, and I've come to love you so much over the years, and there's some blessings with some of these things, because some of the people that you think about are your when you think about your brothers and your sisters in the church, and some people you really think about a lot, and I appreciate you, brother. I think about you a lot, and so.
You text me enough, so I know. No, just kidding.
Hey,
I love you too, brother.
We appreciate you, John, and thanks everybody for tuning in. This is
the Unscripted Podcast.